that's the main thing I want people to understand. Exercise is a modality for healing. And I think in the Western world, we're so used to viewing exercise as something to abuse ourselves with, or get skinny, or, have the perfect body. And that's not what it's, if you study all the ancient religions or spiritual practices, they all had a physical modality with it. The ancient yogis weren't trying to look good in bathing suits, right? Like that, they were doing it for other reasons. And what is that reason? And this is what I want people to really understand, how incredible. I mean, you're a biologist, Catherine, how incredible our bodies are. And our bodies are these tools, these instruments that our soul has created. And so I've said this a couple of times now, and I really want people to understand this, because we've been robbed, I think, of so much education when it comes to true spirituality. True spirituality isn't talking to dead people. True spirituality isn't channeling, or isn't, divination. True spirituality is getting in touch with your spirit. And how do you get in touch with your spirit and your soul? You go into your body, because your body is the Shakti. It's your soul created your body so that the soul could experience itself, so the soul could know itself. And so sometimes we see, when we have these issues come up, these obstacles, which, as Marnie Alton says, they're not obstacles, they're puzzles. That's all they are. It's like a big boulder that we now have to figure out how to move it. And that comes across in the exercise as a stuck emotion, as frustration, as anger. And a lot of times when we feel that, we want to run the other direction and not deal with it. But the body is that instrument that's allowing your soul to find itself. And that's why I always talk about the friction. It's like the match. If you hold a match, it's such an easy analogy. Everybody knows what a match in a matchbook looks like. That match has everything on it to light a light. It's got everything on it to have that spark, but it can't light itself without striking against the matchbook. So what is that strike? That's friction. That's the sweat. That's the anger. That's the depression that comes up. That's the shaky muscles. That's what's causing your awareness to shift inside your body. And so, yes, sometimes people can use exercise as escapism. For example, which you picked up on, taking care of your animals, going out for walks with your kids. That's awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. But it's not the modality for your spiritual awareness, because your awareness comes outside of yourself. When you're doing the bar, the yoga, you're forced to come into your body. And actually, as Marnie Alton says, we feel things here. Actually feel things. It's easy to feel fun stuff. It's not so easy when it's pain. But that pain is necessary. And usually that pain, the physical pain, most of us can handle. It's the emotional pain that becomes unbearable. And that's where we see the addictions come in. That's where we see the overspending on Amazon, because we want to distract ourselves, or turning on the TV, or getting on. I catch myself doing it when I'm journaling or something's coming up. I'll quickly try to go get on Instagram or something.
Yeah.
You catch yourself doing that. You don't even realize that's what you're doing, but your ego's going, no, we're not going to touch that.
It's a feeling of helplessness, and a lot of these feelings, these deep feelings, are projected outside of ourselves at other people in anger and frustration. And what you're doing with this shadow work group, and everyone who's supporting that, is sort of saying, okay, now is a time with this great awakening to actually take ownership ourselves for what's happened. It's completely different to blaming yourself. Like taking ownership of yourself is very different, isn't it, from blaming?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, when we think about, the Western world, I think we spoke a little bit last time about transcendence and immanence. In the Western world, we're taught that God is without us, and there's this thing called sin, and it's wrong and it's bad, and we get punished by God. But in the Eastern world, we're taught immanence, that God is everywhere. There's nothing you have to do. It's already here. God's already there. And the thing about the word sin, and if you do a deep dive into this idea of sin, the original meaning was to miss the mark, to not understand who you are. So when we look at it that way, times we've screwed up in our lives where we've done something stupid, if we can actually learn from that and go, oh, let me course correct, because we felt the feeling of that, then it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah.
Because wisdom, and that's the beautiful thing about the shadow work, is that you start to realize these things that we perceive about ourselves as weaknesses, or embarrassments because we're not athletic enough or whatever it is, are actually very sacred opportunities for us to know ourselves. And I tell people all the time, coming from the yoga world, listen, pretty yoga practices bore me. That's so boring to see a pretty yoga practice. But the messy yoga practices where the person is grunting and sweating and can hardly touch their toe, that's interesting, because there's resistance. There's something that you get to work with. And so I want people, I said this with Shanti and I kind of spoke about this yesterday. Instead of saying, oh, I have to go work out, I have to. No, you get to.
Exactly.
You get to explore yourself. How cool is that?
We talk about language has power, but it so is. And pushing that sense of achievement. There's a lot of studies into happiness and contentment and health. And without that challenge, without that sense of achievement, when people are set easy targets, there's no lasting satisfaction in that at all, because you feel like you're cheating yourself. Initially you might think, well, hey, I did it. But actually deep down, as we always talk about, when you're sitting there late at night, you can't fool yourself. And what the human body is capable of is absolutely wonderful. And we've only got to see this when we look at what happens in wars, and when people really are pushed to their limits. Even what a very elderly person can do that's been sedentary, what they are actually capable of when they need to is quite phenomenal. But do you think one of the issues why there's so much trauma and emotion trapped into people, so much depression? I know it's very complex and there's never one cause, but we live in a society now, it's why we both love the cold showers so much, where it's so not encouraged to challenge or push yourself. The easy route is always encouraged, just be gentle, be gentle.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it. I mean, I was lucky I did not grow up in the generation of everybody gets a participation trophy, because I've said it before, when we were kids, you learn more from losing than you do from winning. If I had a kid, I'd want my kid to lose a couple of kickball games, because that's where the lessons come. That's where the character is built. It's I think we were in the age of like helicopter parents, where kids aren't allowed to like really fight with their friend. I mean, my mother used to tell me all the time with my sister, like when we would fight, she wouldn't get involved. She's like, you two work it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was talking to our friend Stephanie the other day about this. I was like, I'm so grateful that I had that, because it gave me the freedom to challenge myself, to get on an airplane and go all over the world by myself, and to do these things that for me to go. When I first started going to India to study with my teacher, I was not afraid of going to India. I was excited about that, but I was terrified about walking into the school.
Yeah.
I had so much fear, so much self-doubt. All those emotions came up in me too, so I want to express that too. I keep saying, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10, because someone's chapter 10 was that chapter 1 at one point, where they were terrified and nervous, and I just breathed through it and I did it. And it was the best thing. We talk about the initiate's path. What tends to happen, the word guru means to transmute darkness to light. Mm-hmm. So it means to be able to take your darkness, your pain, your hurt, your shadow, and transmute it into the light. So the more your heart breaks, the more the light can shine through. Those are the lessons. Now, if you don't have a teacher, a master teacher, to show you how to do this, then you'll be that match without the matchbook, right? Because you have to have someone because the ego is going to resist. The ego is going to fight back. Why is this? Because the soul is eternal. That's what you're doing this for, to know your soul. But the ego is mortal. And so the ego and the soul are going to constantly be at odds with each other, because the more the soul shines through, the more the ego dies. And that ego don't want to die.
It's very interesting, actually, because I mean, my children, every child's completely unique, obviously, but it was a real pattern with mine, where as babies, when they couldn't crawl or move themselves or communicate well themselves, they were a complete nightmare. But as soon as they could move themselves, they were fine. And because they grew up going for long walks from the moment they could walk and everything. Funny enough, they never had the tantrums because they were out moving all the time and not
energy.
Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason they weren't. Of course, it's a lot more complex than that. And it's not a problem if you've got a child that is having tantrums. Everyone's unique, but it's fascinating when you see these, because I see it the whole time when I'm working with people's animals. Is the fact is so many people, for example, have dogs and they don't let them move and play and act like a dog should. And of course, then you've got all those emotions in there, which then get labeled as behavioral problems. And it's not the dog that's got behavioral problems. It's the fact that they're not allowed to be a dog and let this out. And any problem will build up and up and up. Just like toxicity, if we're eating the wrong stuff, will build up in our body, as you're saying, so will the emotions. So letting things out in a safe place where you're not damaging other people is crucial.
It's crucial. And it's so important you said that, because people do. We're going to be talking about, Catherine and I are going to do later with the food stuff, because that's coming up with Self-Study Saturday. A lot of times people will choose certain foods to cover emotions because it gives them an endorphin high. And so that's going to be another one that, of course, that builds up on top of it.